Indonesia, as the largest archipelagic state in the world, has maritime capabilities like naval weaker than that of the smaller powers of Southeast Asia, like for example Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. It is really problematic when we have many abundant resources in the sea that should be protected, but on the other hand, we have lack capabilities to supervise and secure our resources. Why we need heavily invest in our maritime security? Because there are many issues in the sea that really need to be taken care. For example, number one, fishery, like many illegal fishery happen that come from the foreign country. And number two, about oil and gas communications, that we think we need to protect and guarantee infrastructure of their communications. In status quo, budget is not sufficient in handling and supervising our territory, because like we have limit number of ships and fuel to do patrol, which high frequency. Since Indonesia encompasses thousands of islands and spans almost 6 million squares. So what for this heavily invest? Number one, for example, we're buying 254 green water and navy and 10 fighter squadron, 12 diesel electric submarines, and 110 surface combatants and 90 support ships. But not only that, 54 landing ships and craft. Last one, we provide highly intensive training to our naval to empower high human resources quality. So we think it is part of our investment that we need highly invest. So in status quo, we only have 1% of GDP to this maritime security, right? But our mechanisms, we want to increase 3% up to 4% of our GDP. So it is significant increase 300 times that this budget seems like Japan and India as the medium regional force navy in Asia. So the budget will come from number one, because we see our economic growth of Indonesia, so we want to increase 3% with economic growth 5% until 6%, that can make our fundamental reasons to increase our budget. So, like what happened in India, like they need to be faced dispute that they face economic growth, so they want to allocate this budget to our maritime to their maritime sectors. And number two, if our economy is stagnant, we're going to allocate from another sectors, or maybe as India, because this is the part of our investment that we need to prioritize. That it is an interest of Jokowi to be country of global maritime access. So our goal is we want to empower our maritime security intensively in 17,000 islands in Indonesia archipelago, because we are looking to this in previous government agenda. Yes.
Well, currently rupiah is weakening to dollar, why due to the correct momentum. So I think secondly, the budget for the naval already increased 50%. Why did not increase?
Yes, I got your point. Well, I'm going to explain my second argument. Why this is actually the right momentum of Indonesia to allocate our budget significantly to maritime sectors, because maritime sectors is really contribute to our national income, because when we have many illegal fishing, for example, we lost our revenue that we can be gotten from this, but how unfortunately we still have like supervisions to prevent this kind of illegal fishing. So we think that this is the right momentum for Indonesia as a part of investment. So going by my first argument, that why we need to heavily invest in our maritime sectors. We think that Indonesia problem is status quo, it's really severe, right? We face piracy attacks, illegal fishing, and how we need existency in our maritime area. Now I will explain case by case, right? In the piracy attack, that our quantities is actually increased, the number of piracy attacks is increased year by year. Like the caught, what happened, it already caught by water police, right? Because Indonesia, they see that Indonesia is a potential to be as the nest of the piracy attacks, because they see Indonesia is a strategic international route of trade, that they see there will many ships to go to Indonesian port, for example. So every 3 months, for example, undetected piracy is actually happen the number is 40 cases. But compared to Singapore, which have caught piracy 30 cases, right? Because Singapore is actually cover their budget until 2% of their GDP, that they actually can maintain their maritime security. When we compare Indonesia with the Singapore, when they actually can effectively actively erase or actively decrease the number of the piracy attacks, that's the one we think we should. It is the parallel example of Indonesia that should increase our budget to minimize our piracy attacks. Status quo, it is not really proportional because our island that we are going to protect and the road itself compared to the number of security is unproportional. In the previous year, we really lack of concerns in this kind of our maritime sectors. Right now, when we already concerns to our maritime security or this piracy, we need to be combated, right? To make legitimacy in Indonesia as a maritime state that protect our nations. Moreover, I'm going to talk about now we are open investor in maritime sectors because how Jokowi's speech in APEC that we want to welcome our investor to invest their money in the maritime sectors. That's the reason they will see, number one, Indonesian maritime as strategic sectors that they can invest their money in our maritimes. Second things, when they see that Indonesia is really safe and Indonesia is really safe, that's the moment they see that is strategic international trading growth because Indonesia links between South Africa to Australia. That's the moment when it is the strategic international trading growth. That's the moment we take the potential market that coming from our port to make our sea is safe for everyone who want to invest our national to our maritime sectors. Second things, upon the case of illegal fishing, that we still face this illegal fishing. Like we like patrolling in the sea of boundaries to prevent this, right? Because when we lack patrolling to prevent this illegal fishing, because how we have lack of ships to do patrols. That's the moment, the status quo right now, the obstacle of doing patrolling is about the financial constraints. That's the moment we need financially invest to this kind of the maritime security. Because they see why the problem of illegal fishing still happens. Because another country or another illegal vessels or illegal fishermen doesn't see our existence in the sea boundaries. That they see they don't when the moment Indonesia never do patrols, this moment they still have loophole to do illegal fishing. We propose.
He has lots of ambitions, but his policy should only extend insofar as it brings tangible benefits to society. We think that their policy is going to bring more harm than good, and that's the principle that the opposition is going to stand for. We believe that the status quo allocation is adequate for three reasons. One, we believe that we have lots of small ships which are able to come at an adequate speed to catch these illegal fishers. Number two, we have lots of big ships that are not operational, and we can use that. Or even if, we can sell it, for example, in exchange for smaller ships. We don't need that. We don't think that an increase is necessary. But third of all, we think that it's about strategic allocation of these ships into strategic hotspots. Because we don't think people fish in random sea. There's always going to be certain areas that will have more stores, and I think that's what Indonesia needs to do. Their policy is not going to solve anything. A lot of my arguments would directly clash with their case, but I have one major counter rebuttal to their entire arguments. So essentially, they brought to you three problems, right? Piracy, oil drilling, and also illegal fishing. First of all, in terms of piracy, right? They absolutely do not live in reality. Because in 2002, you have 250 piracy cases, and in 2008, only 50 cases are left of piracy with the current budget. That indicates that there's already progress of combat of piracy. They need to deal with those facts. Number two, when they talked about that oil drillings are not guarded, we believe that this absolutely makes no sense. Because if you want to have oil drilling, you need to ask the permission of government first. It's not as if someone unilaterally put an oil rig and decides to drill there, right? Because it takes lots of bureaucratic procedures and everything. You need to establish the oil rig, which would take months and years. So we think that there's already enough supervision. Number two, the oil rig can be seen from a 200 mil radius through your radar, ladies and gentlemen. So one patrol is actually good enough to supervise that. We don't necessarily think why that is not adequate. But thirdly, in terms of illegal fishing, right? We think that the status quo works because when you talk about fish and extraction, there are obviously hotspots where there are source of major these fisheries in certain sea, for example. So what you need to do is allocate them strategically to places that we call choke points. What we mean by choke points is essentially for people to get to these hotspots, they need to go through this route. For example, the Malacca Strait, right? If you want to fish in some other sea, for example the Java Sea, so Singapore and Malaysia necessarily have to go through Malacca Strait. That's the area that we need to guard, and not the entire Java Sea, ladies ladies and gentlemen. That's the best way for you to prevent illegal fishers from actually coming to Indonesia. The same way for the Arafuru Sea, if you want to prevent the Philippines and also the Malaysian side of Borneo to come in. You also put them strategically there, and you don't have to guard everywhere. We don't think that their policy necessarily solved that problem. So I have two arguments. First, the role of state. We believe that heavy investment means that there needs to be a substantial and significant public good, and we don't think that exists. And we believe that their policy creates a disincentive for internal structural reform. Second of all, I'm going to talk about the harms of their policy, how it creates a geographic security dilemma, which we think harms Indonesia's capability to have economic stability in terms of trade routes and in terms of investment, exactly engaging with the problem that they wanted to talk about. Firstly, the role of state, which is about to create substantial public good. We agree that government invests in military right now, and because all these things impact the society. But when you have heavy investment, what that implies is you need to show that there is a substantial amount of tangible benefit that people can get because it matters so much to them, right? Like for example, why education is 20% is because that everyone feels that benefit. So what they need to show is that everyone gets the benefit of maritime, right? We believe that when you talk about maritime, it only applies to very, very niche target of society. We think that the fishermen, the small individual fishermen, are already protected in status quo because they're not going to fish much anyway, right? The only party that they're protecting are private corporations, the one that's going to get as much fish as possible. And this also does not contribute to the Indonesian economy because our domestic consumption of fish is relatively low. So all of these products are necessarily going to be exported to other countries. So we don't necessarily see that society is getting a direct and tangible benefit. True, illegal fishing needs to be addressed, but we think our status quo mechanism already addresses that, right? Now, when you heavily invest, ladies and gentlemen, which means that you need to use all of these ships in operation, or otherwise people just think that it's a waste of money. Now, as you've heard yesterday, that in order for you to operate a single ship, it costs a lot, right? Now, imagine that you deploy all the 250 and 110 ships that they talked about, and you have to deploy them in areas where people don't really go through anyway. We don't think that brings exactly like tangible impact whatsoever. No, thank you. Whereas, we think that there are other sectors that would necessarily require immediate attention from government. We're not saying that healthcare and education is more important than military, but they do have a more tangible impact to society. As a result, if you only focus on military and you like disregard these other sectors that require immediate attention, it creates public resentment towards the idea of maritime policies, right? And that's exactly the problem because Jokowi's momentum at first was good, that people should invest in maritime. But right now, as approval rating is going down, people don't really have much support. Under their policy, people will get more angry because they don't get a tangible benefit, and all of the other policies that they do get tangible benefits in are not going to be prioritized. We don't think that that's a strategic political capital to be invested in. But number two, one of the things that we need to take a look at is that the problem of illegal fishing does not only lie within equipment, but also within the ethics of the naval officers. Because a lot of the times, illegal fishing happens because of bribery that private companies coming from abroad pay the naval officers to simply let them in. No thank you. Heavy investment necessarily puts the burden in saying that it's the problem of equipment and not on the ethicalities of these officers. We think that's highly problematic because then you create a diffusion of responsibility. People will focus more on the equipment and as opposed to create an internal structural reform on how these naval officers operate. Second harm, how this creates a geographic security dilemma. When you want to heavily invest, you would buy this military equipment from abroad because obviously our national production is not that good, it's expensive, it's not that quick. So you're going to buy an extravagant amount from either West, Russia, or China. That signals to the international community that Indonesia is militarizing. And it creates a security dilemma. People are going to ask why Indonesia is doing this. Are they planning to attack other countries? This is going to create tension, the same case in Cold War between US and the Soviet Union, especially given the sensitive context of South China Sea, where it's very controversial within lots of countries. US is going to increase military presence in the Philippines. China is going to deploy more military ships to these areas. What's problematic about that is when you have too much military presence in one area, people are afraid to go through your trade routes because they fear of possible conflict escalating, ladies and gentlemen. Investors would also not want to come in because there's just too much conflict probability. All of their policy of increasing Indonesia's economy will not accrue. We oppose.
if they say that basically the investment that we have put on in status quo is already sufficient, we have several responses over this. Right? Number one, firstly, because we think that it is not that enough to basically deter these illegal fisheries, because the fact that basically these illegal fisheries ships keep coming every day, more than 5,000 ships. But second of all, if we assuming that basically all of the status quo mechanisms work, we are happy to hear that. Right? But it is not like it is basically preventing us from investing more. Because why? Number one, security doesn't always deal with situation that we are facing currently, right? So, we think that when you're talking about security, it is also about dealing with the current and also the future potential threats that are going to be, mitigated, ladies and gentlemen. But even, for example, dealing with the current situation, we believe that the moment, for example, more supervision, we can do more supervision. We think that that's better, right? More supervision is actually better for security. That's why, for example, in another analogous example, let's say police, we are not necessarily deploying police to only, areas that are, suspiciously affected by crimes, but we are also deploying it to all areas, meaning that we are serious with protecting the security of all sovereignty, for the sovereignty of nation. We say that it is no harm. No, ladies and gentlemen. But not to mention that basically they are afraid that basically this security system and also investment will be corrupted by, for example, irresponsible actors. We think that it is hand in hand, right? Because we have stated to you in the mechanisms of our first speaker that basically it is hand in hand, since we are also providing training, for example, and also supervision to all of the individuals working in this sector. We say that it is going to be hand in hand. With the further implication will be in another debate. Right? So we have several argumentations. Basically, they say that talking about role of states, that the investment should actually target all society, and society will get when the moment they realize that they don't get tangible benefits. I'm going to contrast it with my argumentation. Number one, we say that the consolidated maritime security will also empower economic sectors. Right? We say that as aspiring giant maritime country, it is within our interest to demonstrate that everything could be empowered by empowering sea through maritime strategies, right? What is maritime strategy? Maritime strategy is the strategy to basically utilize all of the assets through maritime security. That's why we think that maritime security is the key factor in directing all of the assets to generate benefits maximally, right? We're talking about economy, for example, when we're talking about the fact that our seas is currently ranked as the most dangerous sea due to illegal ferries keep coming, and illegal ships also keep coming every day. Firstly, there will be two actors being endangered in terms of economy, right? Number one, domestic needs on seas products suffer annual loss up to $20 billion loss, right? That's why we say that, for example, we need technology such as special satellite, for example, to detect more hotspots, just like what they say, right? And also deploy more ships there, so there will be no threats coming from these illegal fisheries to basically, hinder our effort in actually generating more profits, right? But we say that illegal ships sometimes are big. In the status quo, the reason why we need that is because even the mechanisms in the status quo need more complement. For example, in terms of implementing sink vessels policy, then basically we are not able to engage, we are not able to counter the threats from bigger ships. We are only able to basically engage with small ships such as from Vietnam, for example. Right? That's why the moment we are only going to engage with bigger ships, we also need more procurement and technology, also more procurement on the ships at Pasman itself. That's why we think that we need that. Right? We think that it's going to extend our policy activity in the end of the day. Why is that so? Because we are going to make sure businesses that use sea transportation are not harmed. Right? We think that this is a gesture that Indonesia is serious to secure international ships that want to trade. What is the benefit of securing the trade environment? It is creating better environment for, it is signaling to the international society that we are friendly environment for trade, and it is going to be basically good gesture, right? To actually attract more lucrative investment. That is, when you're talking about economy, indeed it is benefiting to all layers of society, because of the moment you are going to secure much profit, you are also going to basically protect your assets. It is significant to all layers of society that we think it's very, very significant. That's why I think it is within our interest also to basically do that in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Because we're talking about economy and profit, you also can empower other sectors, for example, welfare. Right? Okay.
What you do is spending money to people exploring the skill with no one there, and how could it become real profit? I mean, maritime trade is already guarded. People are doing that.
Well, assuming that's true, it is even better the moment we are getting more profits, ladies and gentlemen, right? Because because indeed the notion of Jokowi itself, the main priority is actually to create global market access, meaning that we are going to boast our superiority in maritime, right? Therefore, it is not only all about profit, but it is all about the superiority. If we get more money from these sectors, that is exactly our ultimate goal, ladies and gentlemen. But that's why we say that basically it is not going to actually hurt international society, because first of all, it is also not only, for example, securing it is also for securing domestic needs. We think that it is not the right of others to judge us that way. But last of all, we're going to say that this is also going to be political bargaining in securing sovereignty. If you are also wanting to concern about international society, right? We say that political bargaining of Indonesia is the fact basically Indonesia is the archipelago country itself, right? Meaning that the power of Indonesia should actually be seen from the seas, and this is exactly what makes our look becoming formidable, right? We think that the formidable look will only be there when we do show our superiority in terms of security, ladies and gentlemen. For example, we have technologies, weapons, and also proper ships. We think that first, it is enough to secure our territory. We have to be ready with aggression to Natuna Island, for example, that is potential to be coming. For example, because China builds military bases from there, we think that, okay, maybe right now China doesn't necessarily explicitly said that they are going to attack us, but we have to be ready for that in the future, right? Because the moment they attack us, we also can lend our help to our neighbors in ASEAN, because they are the countries who are desperately needing joint partnership to basically combat China in the end of the day. Indonesia is the leadership figure in ASEAN. We think that it is within the moral obligation of Indonesia to also finally, in the worst scenario, enforce to these cases. That's why we are very proud to propose.
Of the House, we need to clarify that what opposition wants is the normal spending of budget. So we're not saying that we're not going to spend at all. What does that mean? So every year, we're going to spend money with our user allocation. And that amount of money can be used to improve the already existing technology. What we won't do is to buy a numerous and exorbitant amount of ships, like what they claim, like to buy, to make thousands of more ships, thousands of more troops, and all of those things. So we believe that if the concern of team opposition is an improvement of technology, that can be done because currently we already have the technology. Our current budget can be used for research and development to improve this technology without necessarily having to buy another one, especially because all of our strategic locations are already gathered with that kind of technology. What can we do is to improve technology to, adapt the improving the situation of past that happens in those areas. So before I get to my argument, I'm going to first debate the case of the side of the House. They claim about how we want to create more political bargaining position. I'm going to deal with it along with my argument, but before I want to first question, what do they mean by political bargaining power? Because country does not simply succumb to you just because you have more weapons, ladies and gentlemen. Because there are a lot of other countries who necessarily have more power than you. So for example, the biggest case of arming in order to get political bargaining position is Iran. They built nuclear, and the result is that they are sanctioned, for example. Even if nuclear deal does exist, it was a result of 3-year sanctions that harm society as a whole. We don't want us to risk the political bargaining position of Indonesia before we have another Indonesia's maritime deal, for example. No, thank you. So there is not an exclusive benefit coming from that side of the house. Next, we talk about security, right? When we challenge their concern about security, they resort to other means, which is, it's not only about present problem, but also about preventive measure. Number one, the fact that we still allocate it, even though the fact is not that huge, shows that we already care about preventive measure, right? But number two, their parallel example regarding police should not be put into your consideration. Why? There is a huge amount of difference in those areas. Number one, police officers guard people. Okay, maritime will guard fish, for example, so we don't understand that there is parallel in itself. But more importantly, even if it's preventive measure, even if police is sent to remote areas, it's not as much as the area that is already known to be vulnerable, ladies and gentlemen. So what does that mean? Even if you want to create preventive measures, that does not justify you to make an arm race in the whole maritime industry. What do you have to do? If you want to patrol, then deploy one ship. Okay, we're okay with that. Deploy a reasonable amount of troops, but we don't want 200, for example, 10,000 or whatever number that you want to propose, because that is not preventive measure. That's already acting upon an imminent threat, ladies and gentlemen. So we don't like that, especially because that will affect how investors think, ladies and gentlemen. And that leads me to my last rebuttal regarding how they say that this gives legitimacy of government to create a maritime axis for Indonesia. Now, number one, they never explain to you what is maritime axis, right? Maritime axis is the ability of Indonesia to show that all maritime industry must be centralized in Indonesia, for example. So that requires investors, number one, to come and our own our own company, our own people to profit from this industry. First, they argue to you that most of the benefit will be felt by companies because not small fishermen are not affected by illegal fishers that much because the number of their catch will not be different. But big companies are a significantly less amount of people that we should care about, especially because our current budget is already enough. More importantly, ladies and gentlemen, investors do care about the security of your area. But investors also care if there is an excessive security in those areas. Exactly the point coming from Afdhal, right? When you deploy a military weapon that is too much, it shows as if there will be threat in the future. So even if there is no threat right now, investors will think that in the future, most likely there will be threat because Indonesia is already creating the preventive measure right now, ladies and gentlemen. We should not only send a message Indonesia is stable, but a message Indonesia will be most likely stable in the future, and that stability is sustainable. The moment you deploy that much, it shows that there is an imminent threat that you should be worried about, and we don't think that investors like that in comparison with other countries. For example, we don't think other countries that does not deploy troops that much. So we think that maritime axis will not harm investors. We will still be afraid and will continue.
China can deploy more investment on economy and budget and military. Investors will still come to China.
Yeah, investors in China comes in their land, not in their sea. Okay, so it's different. That does not stand. More importantly, ladies and gentlemen, my argument. So what is going to happen if this case is approved is that there will be an ultra-nationalistic behavior resulting in bad decisions made by the government. So we need to understand that when you apply this motion, they must create a narrative to justify this proposal in front of society, right? So, because they want to be accountable to society for spending their money. So government will use justifications such as there are imminent threats, or for example, this is the only way we can solve piracy, for example, ladies and gentlemen. And we argue that this notion will not only be sent by the government, but also by all politicians making individual opinions. So all of part of society will use these narratives as a part of how they internalize what does it mean by maritime security, or what does it mean by to defend your property, ladies and gentlemen. How will people react? Most of it, two reasons. Some part of people will act in the form of paranoia, which means they believe that there is an imminent threat, they should be afraid, and therefore any means necessary is justifiable. But number two, a lot of people will think it as a euphoria, because a lot of people are subject to the radical version of nationalism by thinking that because I have a property, I have to defend it with all my pride because it's my pride as Indonesian. This is especially prevalent in Indonesia because our demography is constantly indoctrinated by nationalism since our early age in education, and most of them interpret it in the most radical and extremist way. As a result, this will create a bad decision in the future for the government, and that is unprecedented. Number one, government will most likely deploy excessive arms or troops simply for all missions, even though it might not require such heavy troops. Why? Because they want to stay accountable, or else society will be mad because we have bought a lot of ships, but we don't use it. So government will probably have to use it. Heavy arms is not effective because number one, it's expensive, and number two, too much ships reduce the maneuverability of those ships in coordinating strategies, for example. Number two, society will have more objections if in the future government engage in bilateral negotiation or diplomacy, like what they contrary to what they believe. Why? Because there's a perception that we are strong, and negotiation is less certain because of arguments and because of compromise. We have failed before in Tipadan and Ligitan. Now if we have more weapons, why should we resort back to diplomacy? This was the narrative that will most probably occur. And that is harmful because it means that we are putting too many people at stake. We're always going to resort to military conflict, even though we know that it is costly, even though we know that there are threats to property and to life as well. We believe that this will only create more harm because Indonesia people now approve and dislike government who still resort to maritime diplomacy. As a result, Indonesia will not be considered as peaceful, but as threatening because it will always engage in more conflict and less likely tension will subside.
finally, in my speech, I'm going to talk about things. Number one, again, security. Number two, economy. And there are some political and also diplomacy engaged on extension, right? Number one, let's talk about security, right? The government say that Santoso is a big wave. We still have small ship in big ship, but they never analyze what happened inside of the ship. In today's condition, Indonesia still lack of technology in terms of small ships and also the big ships, for example. The number also only 98 that cannot even control 70,000 islands of Indonesia. It is not proportional like what happened in Vietnam, even Singapore. Even they also only have 2 islands, even 1 island, but they have more than 50 ships, right? Meaning, to fulfill our interest of our nation, so we cannot do that in the very beginning. That's not mean we have gesture to attack another nation. That's not mean we have gesture also to go to war. But at least fulfilling the demand of the nation as moral obligation of Indonesia as maritime state cannot be fulfilling as Indonesia, because that's the mandate of our institution. We need to maintain our security, right? That's the reason why we put so many policies everywhere, because we need to maintain the fear of individual inside of land, right? And also we need to maintain people that live within the sea, even have finding food, even money within the sea. Also the interest of Indonesia. But number two, they say that in the first point, we only could put this in hotspots like Malacca, even Lombok. That's what not the interest of Jokowi, only centralized in 2 spots, right? Because in today's condition, we have Jaya operation. If we are going to make toll out in Papua to Java, for example, the reason is that we are going to empower economy not only centralized in certain place. What Jokowi wants is that he wants to empower every single place in Indonesia. That's why we need to maintain the security. People comes not only because comes from Malacca, also comes from Papua, even another place of Indonesia. We need to maintain this all security to ensure that every single place that could maximize as trading route in Indonesia in the very beginning. Because that interest of Jokowi, we need to expand, not seems like SBY program, only focusing on these 2 areas, even in Malacca area. We need to expand on that. That's the reason we are going to become giant economy. We could use every single route in Indonesia in the very beginning. That's the reason also to empower more economy in another place. Because in today's condition, we just empower economy sector in Malacca because we put more attention on that. In another place, if we concern on another island, for example, that cannot even cover the today's condition, that's one also we can empower more economic activity on that sector, because it's going to be international route in the end of the day if we put more security. The question would be, it is enough in today's one ship with patrol. That's really impossible for us because we have totally big island and also another small island that we need to control. Maybe we can control international trading, but we cannot control the illegal fishing happen in Indonesia in the end of the day, right? Because we have the limited number in fact. Also in fact, they never mentioned to us how much Indonesia power on controlling, even having patrolling with Jaya operation, because in Santoso we cannot implement it in the beginning. Second point, the top that we don't know when it's happened because it's not a demand of all societies, not beneficial of society. The question, why security toward our nation is not the mandate of constitution and it's not the debate, and also the demand of society, because if we talk about security, all people want it, then what kind of threat, even possibly threat at the end of the day. That's not the case. But number two, even they say that to this condition, Jokowi in law not operates and etc. This is the moment. As Jokowi, we need to both stand empower maritime sector. We don't want to show we need to see our legitimacy in the very beginning of our programs when people elect us, because people elect us vote on us because they see the program and maritime. That's why we need to empower the maritime into this condition. Yes.
You forgot the fact that currently in Tanjung there are 4 ships that are undeployed and there are a lot of other ships similar in other parts of Indonesia. Why can't we deploy
In
those
that
ships?
case, why the illegal fishing still happens, right? In that moment, also we want to empower our human resources basically. But the case is that also have limitation in terms of budget to giving more training, even more education towards this individual. That's the case because you only focus on Java Island, but we left get what Papua, even Maluku people, they also need attention from government to provide incentive education and give them scholarship, for example, to achieve more education. That's really limited to this condition. Even if the case, we need more money to provide more people, more have knowledge about maritime management and etc. That also only happen by increasing budget in today's debate by Mr. Speaker. And the next point, second point, I'm going to talk about economy. Right? They say that investor will not come because number one, they see that we have gesture in empowering our economy, our military. Number one, we don't think another investor will not come, because the example take on Ireland, because number one, Ireland does not have a comparative benefit because even people embargo them. This is really different. Indonesia has a bargaining position as a emerging market. International Indonesia also have more natural resources, right? Example like India, even India to this position deploy empower the nuclear weapon as the initiation, but people still emerge to India. Not only that, China, for example, even China even growing their military until 5, even 4%, people still come to China because security is important to ensure that the business being run well and your business also will keep going, no threat even policy come toward you. Like we think it's totally different. But even if, for this, even if we think that the tension will not happen, even people will not invest will not happen, right? Because of what? Number one, we think another country will not see us is this gesture we're going to attack them. Because our gesture in the very beginning is that we are going to fulfilling our 70,000 of the ship like it's not being covered into this question. Maybe tension going to China, if they are increasing their own military budget until 4%, what's make it different? Because China currently increase their budget because the initiation of they are going to attack, even they are going to interfere in another state. Because their island is not that big like Indonesia, so they don't have any that huge maritime. That's why if they increase their budget, meaning they're not justified. Because Indonesian nation will justify to increase our budgets heavily because we need to protect our 4%, our 70,000 island in Indonesia, right? We don't want to lose existence like what happened in Semifinal and Legitan because we allow control on that island. Because we will not put control. That's the reason why Malaysia put themselves in the very beginning. We don't want it to happen to another island in Indonesia because we only have 100 ships into this condition. We put as much, even to make it possible, we put one island, one ship to at least control the activity what happened in that island, and no people will try to attack us in the very beginning. So even if maybe, for example, we're going to one potential event. Number one, tension will always happen. Like for example, and maybe you are talking about China will try to find any tension in other states because they want to become a kingdom of China in past. They also have interest to China Sea, meaning China also try to have Natuna Sea, even another sea in South Asia. Meaning the tension will always happen on China for that. But at least in Indonesia, we are already in the very worst scenario if we go to war in the end of the day. I think it's justified for us. Last one, we talk about politicals, right? They say that politicals into this condition as relevant and the purpose will not pass diplomacy. It is not a case. We think diplomacy will work with China if we have the same bargaining position. If we have the same capacity of military, that's why they count us as a nation. If we have our position, they will not see us as legitimate nation, they are as the partner in terms of political, even negotiation finally. We propose.
I'm pretty sure that there are unresolved questions which make you confused. So I will tell this story to solve your question. Let's call Arif Budiman in the last briefing told us that one ship spent around 35,000 tons of oil. Luckily, I'm studying oil. So 1 kilo of oil equals to 1 liter fucking shit. But it costs around 350 billion rupiah just for one patrol. And for all the soldiers to sleep on your barracks for 1 month, do not leave their family for what? For exploring the seas, the parts of your glory in ocean of India, and that's all. And then that's not strategy. And then the whole strategic moving will be to go to Malacca Strait, will be to go to Arafura Strait, will be to go to South China Sea, which currently we are doing. So what is the best one, right? Get the question. In the Malacca Strait, the best one would be 200 mil of vicinity per 1 day of patrolling, which equals to only 3 ships deployed in Malacca Strait, and they are perfectly safe. With the judgment, that's what are we doing? Then currently, even if we think might be not enough, our budget is still accommodating towards it year by year. There is no need of heavily impact towards issue. No, thank you. And what they are doing? They are going to add more, for example, 2,200 ships, I don't know, and each cost 10,000 of billions. Bear in mind that currently rupiah is weakening to dollars, meaning that the price of the ship is higher, the price of the oil is higher. So, thank you. What is needed in Bawean Island? What is needed in Rote Island? It's not them being patrolled by a ship of a cruise, showing a superiority of maritime. What is needed is they are being equipped. They are being, be aided with fishing for better fishing poles, better maritime hats. That's what is necessary for them. That's what brings a benefit to this working Sahara. Because that's what we think, ladies and gentlemen. what they are doing is those cruise of ship, what to deal? Of fishermen wooden vessels, which only takes 10 kilograms of fish if they are lucky in a week. And if they match them, what they did? They bomb the wooden vessel, they carry the passenger, and then they spend oil to carry it away to the main island, and then they will do the core process there and so on and so forth. They're expanding, which is very wasteful. So, ladies and gentlemen, wait. The sea toll, which they are talking about, it doesn't need military guidance. With our ship of Banda Aceh could guard the sea toll effectively. I'm not sure about the technology, but please do not underestimate us. Numbers doesn't matter, because the big ship will be pretty slow to catch up the fast and small vessels, which are usually used for the fishermen. And the big ship could not handle if politics bilateral is not established with the private companies, which currently are taking thousands of tons of fish. We think that's what we need to do, and numbers only deter them because it shows our hostile gesture towards them. But Harry, what are you talking about?
Number one, into this budget will not enough to expand even half an episode because just you can buy all even the required the last episode. And the second one, the legitimacy is not how much the fish that they are talking about, but we stand for them.
Well, I'm talking about legitimate elector, but for your information, if they acknowledge that our budget is limited, then it is better to invest our budget to realize those people than to leave it as an art in Jakarta. I mean, your proposal is problematic. Now, let's deal with them. I know this is pretty foreign to deal with it. They are talking about we are very jealous with Vietnam and Thailand. I mean, they have good maritime power. Well, for your information, we need to deal differently with different geography. I mean, in Vietnam, they have only 300 meters square of sea. Might be you impact 10 ships, you impact 100 ships, that's overloading. We could swim over the sea for 1 month. But in Indonesia, in one country, you can't swim over. So what is the best way to protect our sea rights? The best way would be 3 defense on the year. First is that national approach towards bilateral relations. We think in order to not be threatened, in order to have no more conflict, to begin with we need to diplomatically approach to each people and ambassador to make them not have hostile gestures to us. We are presented with a very friendly nation. And currently all the policies supported by Vietnam, supported by thinking type of policy, will create a militarized policy. A policy that is not suitable for us. It might be suitable for China, and for your information, China is demilitarizing. They are currently impacting gold, oil, and black gold in Nigeria. So that's what's proving to you that military is not our choice. Why so? Because military will show our hostile gesture towards people. Military will deter people to dialogue with us. Not to mention also that's the biggest challenge for us. Not to mention also increasing the number wouldn't help our security. I mean, illegal fishers only, vicinity of 200 miles from the shore, and they have a small vessel which can be catched, or if you caught it, then you need to, spend all the oil there. But not to mention also currently what we need to get is only maritime strength, not only alcoholic strength. And that's exactly why piracy is concentrated. And for your information, we are in Somalia. I mean, we are not having those sorts of pirates, and currently differing only 15 cases. And now, four ships are catching to several issues. So with my statement, there is a clear different factor that they never prove why, but by impacting will create more numbers, and by more numbers meaning more security. That's the problem in that case. And in talking about security island, we think they never also show why illegal fishing will be deterred. We think the best way to deter them was to approach to the nation, to refrain their fishermen, to educate their fishermen, to talk to their fishermen, not to do anything to match up with the countries of Indonesia. What is the best way? We are asking, we are establishing AEC, we think it is our best interest to not have hostile gesture, to not be caught as a small nations like Ireland, small nations like, other various countries. We think that's exactly what. Not talking about economy, they talk about trading. Well, trading, if not going to be talking island is finished, then the question would be what is adequate supervision, right? Adequate supervision is, as I told you, it's only 300 million per ship. 3 is enough for tanker. Not to mention also piracy is not solved by those numbers. It is solved by control of port. It is solved by more facility guardians and so on and so forth. With ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, when we have to get advantage from the trading, we do not only safeguard the route, but we join the trading. And in order to join the trading, we need the political capital and the capital itself to join it. We think their idea is perfect. This is problematic. Now the last one, talking about a question coming to Harry. We think sanction is there. Anthony said, and now we think, this is my closing statement, if you do not want to have engage with threatening countries, then you do not make one choice. Your hostile gesture will make it. We think Jokowi's image is pretty much unimportant, especially when we are talking about investment, winning our money to invest in our local society. Thank you.
There are questions to make it simple for you to adjudicate this. One, is the status quo enough or do we need more money? Number two, is this within the role of government? And number three, how will this impact international relations? First, is the status quo enough or not? What we heard from the affirmative is essentially a shoplifting of the problems that exist in Indonesia. We have piracy, we have illegal fishing, we have oil drilling and island problems, right? We agree, these problems do exist. But what they fail to characterize is what is the root cause of that problem, right? Because we've never heard an analysis of why the inadequacy of quantity is necessarily the root cause of the problem, right? We've told you specifically in status quo, there are lots of mechanisms to deal with this. Number one, when it comes to illegal fishing, we've told you that we can have strategic hotspots in choke points to prevent these illegal fishers from coming in to these strategic areas. Whenever they responded with this was inadequate. We've told you when it comes to oil drilling, there's agreement. You can have one ship to patrol within a 200-mile radius. You don't need lots of ships to do that. When it comes to island protection, right? Like for example, within the borders, allocated to the borders. We never understand why you need to have each individual island to have its own unique ship to protect it, especially when people don't live there. That doesn't make any sense. Their analogy about police also doesn't make any sense at all. So we believe that all of their analysis never really shows why the status quo is inadequate. But what we've told you in opposition is, in addition to that, another problem that exists for illegal fishing is the bribery of naval officers, is the fact that these people have low ethic track record. And this is something that we need to fix. Under their policy, it shifts the responsibility. It says that illegal fishing is caused because of the lack of equipment and not because of the fault of the officers. That is the disincentive for internal structural reform. The only response we hear from them is training. Never did explain what training is this and how will it actually fix the ethic problem. We don't think that they managed to explain why the status quo is not enough. We take this much. Second point of clash is about, is this within the role of government, right? We heard this coming very late, coming from Hayes, when he said that the moral obligation of the government is to provide security for society. That is an argument to have spending, right? That is not an argument to have excessive spending on military, because you need to show the proportionality of the threat and the need of that society to be able to justify the amount that you're going to have. The only problem that we hear from their side of the house, which was already rebutted by us, is fallout, which Albert has already told you, you don't need military to guard fallout, right? So we don't necessarily see that there's a huge push or a huge amount of need for you to invest that much. We've told you that the moral obligation of the government is to take into account, does this benefit the society at large or not? We've told you that small fishermen are already protected in status quo. Their policy would only benefit the private companies who are going to export the goods anyway to outside. So it doesn't necessarily benefit society. They never explain why this is not the case. Second clash also goes to us. Finally, how will this impact international relations? Because both teams agree that it's important to have investors and trade, and also better protection in terms of our sovereignty and border. But they never explain how having more ships would necessarily attract more investors, because they only say, oh, people would feel that it's more secure. The calculus that was missing in their analysis is how other countries perceive the increased militarization of Indonesia. We've told you that when you want to heavily invest, you need to buy the ships from elsewhere, from the West, from Russia or China. That signals that Indonesia is militarizing. That signals that Indonesia is ready for something that's bigger than that. We think that's problematic given the sensitive context of South China Sea, where US is going to increase military presence in the Philippines, China is going to increase more military presence in the South China Sea. That creates tension. And people are afraid to go to these areas. Sure, there are no conflicts right now, but the perceived conflict of having lots of military in that area deters investors, deters the trade from actually happening. That also deters Indonesia from actually engaging in diplomacy, because you create this ultra-nationalistic narrative that Aldi talked about, but never responded by the affirmative. All in all, Jokowi has ambitions, but ambitions need to be realistic. We oppose.
ladies and gentlemen, we have invested much to empower maritime assets on fisheries and in many places of regions cost us billions of dollars. That's why we can't back off. When we intend to invest on fisheries and sovereignty, we also have to significantly invest on maritime security, as this is our key factor to basically secure the all to maximize the benefits. We think that the insignificant increase that they are talking about in status quo is only needed for actually partially achieving this goal. Because, for example, they are saying that oil is expensive. We are saying that basically this insignificant increase is only going to be used, for example, to purchase the oil, but not to empower the maritime security in the end of the day, as we are going to actually seek for, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we say we have two issues to be talked about in this debate. Firstly, whether we need significant improvement in this maritime security, and second issue is talking about the economic and political benefits in the end of the day. They are saying that basically the thing that we have in status quo is enough already. For example, there will be proportional allocation of ships that will be deployed strategically, right? We said that we have said to you that maybe it's true that the more supervision is better, if it is feasible to do so, right? But we think that the proportionality itself will also be there, right? Because for example, proportionality will be there, but we are only going to, for example, put more ships in certain areas and going to give equipment of technology for these respective ships that have been proportionally deployed, right? That's why we say that it's going to be proportional. We have said it to you there, but we can't dismiss it to the threats that we are facing. We have told you that, right? Firstly, the present threat, which is the illegal fisheries, but second is the future potential threat that is the China's aggression toward our border, right? They are saying that this is going to send the signal of militarization without explaining to us why is it necessarily going to be so. Because number one, we have said to you that basically it is common for Indonesia to develop the security in their signatory assets, which is seas. But second of all, when they're talking about perception of others, we don't think that it is relevant in this debate, because it is going to be another debate how to basically clarify it, right, ladies and gentlemen. But we are ready for the basically worst scenario that on how that we are going to go to that war, right? Joining our neighbors in ASEAN to basically counter China. We think that it is also within our interest to basically involve in the worst scenario if it is actually for our, for our more obligation to as the leader or figure of ASEAN itself. Right? But we think that the moment they say that finally Indonesia will resort this to use excessively this military, we think that this is contradictory to their idea that Indonesia has rationality to not resort to war when it's not needed, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we think that it is not consistent. But we think that the moment we go to that, it is momentum for us to maximize the utility. We have to invest it from now on. Right? But second of all, that's why we think that it is still needed. But second issue about the economic and political benefit, number one, they say it costs us much. We have said to you that basically we have the way to generate the income to basically do that. But it is actually very flexible, and it is not a debate how to get the money, because it is flexible where the government can get the money. For example, asking loans from banks, for example, or even cooperating with other countries. It is very flexible, right? But we think that it's worth it because we're dealing with economic and sovereignty that all society basically can taste, right? For example, by basically doing this, firstly, it saves billions of dollars annually, which means that we also can, empower welfare. But we're also talking about sovereignty, that on how that this is a political bargaining for us, which is the pride of Indonesia, based on the demand of society that basically wants their sovereignty being protected. To begin with, ladies and gentlemen, that's why we think that it is still the civil government to basically comply to the demand of society, protecting the sovereignty, and also basically mitigating the future potential threats, while at the same time basically protecting our national assets in current status quo. That's why we have said to you that it is needed and it is important for us.